a pair of competitive games from the Houston Rockets over the weekend against the Orlando Magic on the road and the Clippers at home, ultimately falling just short in both games, which, hey, it's better odds for the ping pong balls, but there were still some good positives to take away from these two games. We're going to break it all down for you right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, and also host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. Now, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, got a bunch to talk about in today's episode. We've got the Rockets and the Orlando Magic playing their game Friday night. We've got the Rockets against the Clippers and the Sunday night game. And then any, extra thoughts from those two games that I don't get to in the first couple segments, I'll throw in at the very end of the episode, as well as it's that time of year. We're going to start doing tankathon spins. I told myself I would wait all the way until March. March is right around the corner, literally one day away. So I figured I would break the seal a little early. We're going to start doing tankathon spins at the end of every episode so that we have something to look forward to, or potentially not, depending on how badly the spin goes. But so we're going to go talking about the Magic game, then we'll talk about the Clippers game, then we'll get into segment 3 with any extra thoughts about those two games that stand out, and do a tankathon spin at the tail end of things. But let's start with the Magic game, because this was a game coming in that, right, first game out of the All-Star break, probably going to be, a little rusty for both teams involved. The Magic were actually favored to win this game, which I thought was a bit disrespectful to the Rockets. And ultimately, it went pretty much exactly how I thought it was going to go. We did a Spaces just before the game. Myself and Roosh Williams talked for like an hour, just, coming out of the All-Star break, that kind of thing, Friday evening going into this game. And I said, hey, it's going to be a competitive game between two lottery-bound teams, and I think that ultimately the Magic are going to win it out at the end. And that's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, as the game progressed, I found myself, even though I was firmly against the idea of wanting the Rockets to win this game, especially against another potential bottom 5 team in the Orlando Magic, the ping pong balls are super important at this point, so I want the L's to rack up, especially against other lottery-bound teams. But as this game was going, I kept thinking to myself, no, I want them to win this game so bad, because Jalen Green had that stretch in the fourth quarter of this game where the Rockets went down by about double digits, and then Jalen Green just kind of took over. He hit a 3. There were a couple more buckets by, I believe, Jae'Sean Tate, and then I think it was Alperen Sengun possibly, who, kind of kept cutting into the lead. And then Jalen had those 2 back-to-back driving layups where he just was an absolute blur, finished through traffic, just exploded past the Orlando Magic defense, cut the lead to just 3 points. It was a 104-101 game at that point, just under 5 minutes to go in the game. The Magic called timeout, and immediately coming out of the timeout, Christian Wood took the next 3 or 4 offensive possessions for himself. And that was hands down one of the most frustrating things that I'd seen, because up until that point, Jalen really looked like he had it going. He was playing a dominant game. He looked really good. Jalen finished that night with 23 points on 9 of 16 shooting, 4 of 9 from the 3-point line. He had 5 boards. He had 2 assists. He had 4 steals in that game. He was active, playing the passing lanes. He had arguably one of his best games of the season against the Magic. And he was the one who cut that lead down to a 1-possession game. He didn't get another shot till I think it was 1.5, left in the game, 1:30 something left in the game was he finally got another shot. Now, in between that point from his last made layup to that shot attempt at about, 90 seconds, 100 seconds left in the game, he did have one possession where he got a switch. I believe it was on Wendell Carter Jr., dribbled the clock out and didn't do anything with it and kind of kicked it to EG in the corner. and EG had to make something happen. So EG drove baseline, floated the ball up and in. But past that, like, he just wasn't involved in the offense down the stretch of this game. And that's something that we've seen so often in these games where Jalen's having a solid quality night and then suddenly gets iced out of the offense down the stretch. And it was just really frustrating to see. And not only that, like, because the Rockets could have very easily won this game. And it felt like they got away from what was working for them offensively. And a big part of that was Christian Wood coming in and kind of disrupting the flow of the offense, taking, it felt like he was going after his, right? Even though Jalen Green had the hot hand, Christian Wood was the one that came in and started taking all the shot attempts after Jalen was on that stretch coming out of the Orlando Magic timeout. Now, I will say also one of the other points of this game, and this is something that has to be fixed. It can't continue. It is absurd. Christian Wood's free throw shooting, going 3 of 13 against the Magic, was one of the most painful things that I've had to witness in recent memory watching this Rockets basketball team. Every trip to the line was, I mean, at that point, it's absolutely mental. Like, there's nothing like, yeah, there might be, some, a better way with his form. Maybe he needs to get in the lab and like rework that and just focus on that. But ultimately, going 3 of 13 at the free throw line, that is a mental thing. And for C. Wood, for a player of his caliber, it's inexcusable. There is zero reason for Christian Wood to go 3 of 13 at the free throw line ever. There's zero reason for him to shoot below 70% from the free throw line. For a guy that shoots as well as he does from the mid-range, from deep, it's almost like Josh Smith-esque, right? Because Josh Smith was like a decent quality shooter. And I say quality, right? He was a streaky three-point shooter. But for some reason, like, Josh Smith could hit threes and they could never sink free throws. And that's kind of where we're at with Christian Wood right now. And it's really aggravating because Christian Wood, so many of his offensive possessions end with him going to the foul line because he just tucks his head down and drives into the defense and looks for contact and trying to finish over defenders rather than surveying and trying to kick it out when he starts his offensive move. So if he's not converting at the free throw line, those are empty possessions. Those are wins for the defense. Opposing teams might be looking at Christian Wood right now thinking, you know what? Let's just put him on the line. He's not going to hit him anyways. That's rough. And that just can't happen. If you want to be the focal point of this team's offense, if you think you're the number one option in your head, you've got to be able to hit your free throws at a better clip. Because again, at that point, it's unbearable. It's really, really tough to watch. Elsewhere in this game, I mean, the rest of the starters, decent games all around. Jae'Sean Tate, Eric Gordon, some quality games. KPJ, this was the game that he rolled his ankle, and then he missed the game against the Clippers, didn't practice on Saturday when the Rockets held their practice. So, hopefully he's on the mend, especially with KPJ bobblehead night coming up here soon. It'd be really crummy if he didn't get his bobblehead, or I didn't get to play on his bobblehead night is what I'm trying to say. But off the bench, Dennis Schroeder continues to be really impactful off the bench. And we're going to talk about kind of his presence, especially in this next game against the Clippers, and what he brought to the table there, flirting with a triple-double. The Rockets coming up just short at the end of regulation, a chance to tie that game against the Clippers. We're going to get there in a quick moment after a message from our friends over at Built Bar, because look, when it comes to protein bars, you've got to check out Built Bar if you haven't yet. They are the number one protein bar on the market. Every single bar is covered in 100% delicious chocolate. They've got so many amazing flavors to choose from too. Strawberry, cookies and cream, raspberry, mint brownie, my personal favorite, coconut brownie chunk. You can't go wrong with a single bar on their menu. Every single bar is low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Amazing if you're on a keto diet. Amazing if you're trying to cut back, lose a little bit of weight. You can check them out. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's dive into the Rockets Clippers game, now the second of their 2-game slate over the weekend. And this was a game that, based on how the Rockets got absolutely manhandled by the Clippers just before the All-Star break, I wasn't exactly expecting a super competitive game, and they proved me wrong. The Rockets actually played a decently respectable game. However, the X factor in this game, and the man who completely changed the complexion of this one, was none other than Ivica Zubac, because my goodness, was he playing like I don't know, Bill Russell in his prime. I guess he anchored the Clippers defense and had an absolute lid on the basket for anything that the Rockets tried to get going inside the paint. The Rockets finishing with just 34 points in the paint in this one. And I mean, you saw it all throughout the game. Zubac was changing the looks from everybody on the floor. He swatted Jalen Green a couple times. He had a lid on the basket. He finished the game 14 points, 15 boards, had 3 assists. He had a steal. He had, how many blocks was it? 6 blocks. Yeah, that's absurd. Again, playing like a prime Bill Russell out there for, against this Rockets team. He was a plus 16 for the Clippers in a 1-point game. That's how good he was. They were getting absolutely obliterated, smoked, whatever when he wasn't on the floor. And then when he was on the floor, he completely changed the complexion of the game for them. He only didn't play in 14 minutes. And in those 14 minutes, the fact that the Rockets completely took advantage of the Clippers in that stretch of time, I mean, should have done more with it, though, because the Rockets ultimately falling just a little bit short after jumping out to a really solid start in this game, a 28-19 first quarter, kind of let go of the rope a little bit at the end of the second quarter in this one. Going into halftime, games, not dead even, but a lot closer than it was. And then they play kind of even in the third quarter, and then fourth quarter rolls around, and the Rockets just can't get the buckets that they need down the stretch. Zubac has his fingerprints all over this game. The Rockets did cut it to a 1-possession game, and Jalen Green had an opportunity to tie it up 98-95. Steven Silas drew up a play. Steven Silas told us post-game that it wound up actually being a play drawn up for Eric Gordon instead of Jalen Green. Eric Gordon was the first option on this drawn-up play, but the way that it kind of broke down with the inbounds, Jalen Green got the look as the second option, got the pass, on the inbounds play, pulled up for it, and he had a really good look at 3 and just unfortunately couldn't convert it. This was just probably the worst game Jalen Green's had in a while, and it kind of felt like because he couldn't get anything going inside, it really made it difficult for him to get his outside game going as well. So Jalen finished the night just 10 points, 4 of 18 shooting was really rough to watch. 2 of 10 from the 3-point line. It didn't get a single trip, I should say, to the free throw line. Had 3 rebounds, had 3 assists, had 2 steals. So, and he played a heavy load. I mean, 38 minutes, but the 4 of 18, I mean, he hit 2 of 10 from 3. And then the only 2 makes that he had inside the 3-point arc were the 2 lob passes that he caught. So he had the one from Josh Christopher, which was awesome. It was, Josh Christopher lobbed it up to him from about half court, and Jalen, yammed it home. And then he had another one later on in the game from Dennis Schroeder as well. Both of those guys doing a great job just kind of finding Jalen on the wing, kind of making that eye contact with him. And then he goes cutting towards the rim and is able to just elevate over the defense and finish those lob passes. But apart from those 2 dunks, Jalen got nothing inside. His other, 6 shot attempts inside, all erased or misses or whatever. And again, it feels like for Jalen especially, when he's able to get going inside, get to the free throw line a little bit, get some easy shots at the rim, it feels like it kind of helps open up the basket a little bit more for his outside shot, rather than, like in this game, him just being turned into, a standstill spot up 3-point shooter. And a couple of the threes that he did take were kind of at the end of the shot clock, force them up because the shot clock's winding down and you got to get some kind of a shot up. Sure. So not necessarily the most quality offensive possessions for Jalen Green, but still, it's unfortunate when he doesn't necessarily have his rhythm behind him, or when he's not in the flow of the game, because he just hasn't been able to get any other easy looks at the rim. And that's why, and this is something that we've harped about here and elsewhere, and many fans have, clamored for, is for him to be able to utilize some level of like his mid-range game, right? Because I'm not expecting him to develop like a floater overnight. That's something that he's going to have to like try and go add to his bag this offseason and come back with. But what he does have, and what we've seen him utilize before, is that mid-range jump shot, right? He's got a decent midi like step back that he can go to in the, in moments like this where they've got a big who's just camping in the paint, who is eating up everything coming anywhere near the rim, and he's not getting any calls, not getting to the free throw line. He had one where he went into the paint, challenged Zubac, and I mean, maybe it could have been called a foul. Maybe it was a clean, contest on his part. But, Jalen went up, and I mean, he hung in the air. He challenged him, right? It looked like it was going to be a poster slam. And unfortunately, Jalen didn't get the call. He winds up, on his butt on the floor with no call. Ball's going the other way. And those are kind of tough to stomach, right? Those are kind of the, maybe he's hitting the rookie wall a little bit and the refs just aren't giving him the benefit of the doubt. And as Jalen Green, gets more comfortable, as he bulks up a little bit, he's going to have those moments where he's still able to leverage his explosive speed, his athleticism against defenders in the paint like that. But he's also going to have the muscle to kind of force the issue a little bit more, right? Because right now, sometimes it feels like he jumps up and into defenders and he's not really moving them hardly at all, right? He's just jumping up and into them. They're going arms straight up and down, and it's not resulting in any calls for Jalen Green. But as he bulks up, as he gets bigger and stronger, he's going to be able to dive into those defenders and kind of force them to stumble, right? Force their arms to come down harder on him because he's finishing stronger through their, contest than he is right now. So overall, kind of a rough game from Jalen Green, unfortunately, who did have a good, I will say Dennis Schroeder did have a good game in this one, flirting, I should say, with a triple-double. The efficiency not quite there from a shooting perspective. He was just 4 of 15, but he only had 2 turnovers. And I remember at one point, like I looked up and I think he had 10 assists and just 1 turnover, and then he had 1 at the very, very tail end of the game. But flirting with a triple-double here, 11 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists, just the 2 turnovers. Again, just 4 of 15 shooting, so those are some rough numbers from Dennis Schroeder as far as just actually converting on his shot attempts. But he got the starting nod in place of Kevin Porter Jr., again sitting out with the ankle injury in this game. And he did a good job, as he's done so far, as a member of the Rockets, of organizing the team, getting guys in spots to be successful, playing some really quality defense, even though the shooting wasn't quite there and the efficiency was, you definitely like to see that be a little bit better from Dennis Schroeder. It really felt like you could feel his impact overall on this game, start to finish. He made his presence felt. And then off the bench, the Rockets actually got a ton of bench support in this one from KJ Martin, Alperen Sengun, and Garrison Matthews. So Garrison finishing with 17 points off the bench, 5 of 10 shooting overall, 4 of 8 from the three-point line, got to the free throw line 4 times, hit 3 of them. Garrison doing what he does off the bench. He had a couple steals. He had one where he got a breakaway and got fouled. Really hard foul. Was so slow to get up, looked like he maybe rolled his ankle a little bit. And then Garrison Matthews, true to his Iron Man self, he was back in the game, a little bit later on, no issues. But when the fall originally happened, it looked like he was, stumbling to get up. He was able to walk off the court, without any assistance, which is always a good sign. KJ Martin off the bench in this one too. Biggest thing for him, scored a big chunk of his points from the 3-point line. That's something that has been so sorely missed from KJ Martin, finishing the game 3 of 6 shooting, 3 of 3 from the 3-point line on his way to 10 points. He had 2 rebounds, 2 assists, just kind of an overall solid game from KJ Martin. And then Alperen Sengun, this is the guy who he should have played more in this game. And this is where it hurts so much that he and Christian Wood are, tethered together at that 5 spot. And Alp finished with 15 points, 5 of 8 shooting, 1 of 3 from deep, 4 of 6 from the charity stripe. He had 3 rebounds, and he scored, I think it was 14 points in 10 minutes flat, like something like that, something absurd. He wound up playing, a bit more, but this was a game where Alp and his size and the way that he plays would have been, I think, a little bit more beneficial down the stretch, especially considering the fact that Alp can actually hold his own against opposing bigs, whereas throughout this game, we saw Jae'Sean Tate being forced to check Zubac because Christian Wood just doesn't or can't or won't. Like, take your pick of the above reasons for why Christian Wood doesn't wind up checking opposing bigs. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating having to make that concession, especially if you're Jae'Sean Tate, having to check, a 7-footer just because your center can't or won't, or he's going to get abused if he does check him. And there were, plenty of times too with miscommunication on the defensive side where, I think there was one play in particular where Christian and Jalen were kind of like trying to communicate on who goes where during a pick and roll, that kind of thing. And it just got completely botched. And for stretches of this game, their pick and roll defense by the Rockets was not great, right? The low man was never in position for the rotations. And that's been a recurring theme, unfortunately, throughout this entire season, is that the Rockets defensive schemes, they've had to boil it all down and make it so simple and just go with like a basic switch everything or switch 1 through 4. And the 5 is going to drop on pick and rolls because they can't get into anything more complicated than that, because unfortunately their players just don't adapt well to these circumstances. And it's certain guys like, individually, we've seen guys grow defensively on this Rockets team, but as a whole, as a collective unit, the team defense is just abysmal at times, unfortunately. And that's to be expected with a young team, but it is concerning that they haven't been able to get it down to a point where they're, super concrete with it. I'm not expecting top 10, even top 15 or top 20 level defense, but it's the repeated like relapses and breakdowns that we see on, a game by game basis that keep happening that are a bit concerning for this Rockets team. Now, I will say, one of the silver linings in this game is the Rockets actually did a great job of taking care of the basketball. They only had 6 turnovers total. And that's been something that has been a thorn in the Rockets side all season long. And that's one of the reasons that they were in this game, despite the fact that they were only shooting 38% from the floor. They wound up shooting 40.5% from 3, which was big, but 38% from the floor. They weren't wasting their opportunities offensively, right? They weren't making a lot of shots offensively, especially when they got it inside the 3-point line. But when you're not coughing the ball over and giving those opportunities to the opposing team, then you're kind of saving yourself a little bit, right? You give yourself a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a comfort zone as far as what you can actually give up, or, the shots that you're missing, they're not complete backbreakers when you're missing 2 or 3 shots in a row and then turning the ball over 2 or 3 times in a row. That's how you find yourself down double digits, down 20 plus, that kind of thing. And so we didn't see that in this game. Even though the efficiency wasn't quite there for the team, we saw them taking care of the basketball. And that was a much better sign overall than things that we've seen previously. Now, unfortunately, I want to get into a few more points from this game, maybe some overarching thoughts coming up here in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. Because look, football might be over this season, but basketball's in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And hey, it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. So head over to their website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Final thoughts from this pair of Rockets games, maybe some overarching thoughts moving forward into the rest of this season. But I think first place that I want to go is, unfortunately, now we've seen it in we've got now a sample size of 5 games of Dennis Schroeder playing with the Houston Rockets and kind of what he looks like being mixed into the Rockets rotation. Now, unfortunately, Kevin Porter Jr. has missed a couple of those games against the Suns and now against the Clippers. So we don't get a firm idea of what the true rotational minutes are going to look like quite just yet. And even against the Magic, the first game out of the All-Star break, with everybody healthy, Kevin Porter Jr. wound up rolling his ankle. So he didn't play his full allotment of minutes. Allotment? Is that a word? I'm going to go with allotment. Sure. I don't think that's a word, but we're going to go with it. So KPJ just got 21 minutes against the Magic, right? So Dennis Schroeder wound up, taking control at the end of that game. And so for me, and kind of where I come away, thinking about what these minutes rotations are going to look like, I was optimistic that what we'd see is that Eric Gordon and that kind of probably in my head, I was thinking Garrison Matthews would be the 2 guys to kind of take a hit to their minutes to be able to make sure that the 10 guys in the rotation, understandably, are getting decent amount of minutes off the Rockets bench. But we really haven't seen that take place just yet, again, because there's been some inconsistency with the lineup across these 5 games that the Rockets have been trying to incorporate Dennis Schroeder. Now, I will say that Steven Silas is being very intentional about matching Dennis Schroeder's minutes with some of the guys off the bench. Like, for example, against the Clippers, Dennis Schroeder wound up playing the entirety of the first and third quarters, I believe. And a big reason for that is because as Steven Silas is working through his substitution patterns, he's getting other guys off the bench a chance to play alongside Dennis Schroeder. So it's not just Schroeder and the starters, right? He's kind of staggering the lineups a little bit so that different guys get a chance to play with each other, and so that he has an opportunity to play alongside guys like, the starters. Then he also gets minutes alongside KJ Martin, Garrison Matthews, Jay Gup, players like that, right? But in all of this, the biggest concern, and the concern that I had when the trade was originally consummated, was what was this gonna look like for Josh Christopher moving forward? And ultimately, in the 2 games post All-Star break that we've seen out of Josh Christopher now, he's finished both of these games 12 and 13 minutes played, respectively. He is now the guy lowest on the totem pole in minutes, and it's kind of unfortunate to see, right? Because of how well he had played up until this point, kind of being the spot backup, like primary ball handler at stretches of this season. And in both of these games, Josh has struggled. I mean, against the Magic, Josh Christopher's stat line: 12 minutes, 0-4 from the floor, 0 points scored. He had 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 turnover. That's it, right? And then against the Clippers, Josh Chris put up in 13 minutes, 0-3 from the floor, did have 3 rebounds and did have 3 assists, had 0 turnovers, so that's solid. But, again, didn't score the basketball at all in that game. And I don't know if it's just, he's in a, minor shooting slump now, or maybe it is like, a rhythm thing where he's not on the floor, or not, doesn't have the ball in his hands as much when he is on the floor, kind of being turned into a bit of a spot up 3-point shooter now that he's been moved to more of an off-ball role in the minutes that he's on the floor. Don't know what it is, but it's been unfortunate to see Josh Chris come out of the gate of All-Star break and put up a couple clunkers back-to-back, right? The assists against the Clippers were nice to see, but Josh Christopher is a guy that you want to see be able to put the ball in the basket as well, right? He's a guy that has had 0 issues doing that throughout the season, right? He's largely been able, you just give him the ball and he makes his moves quick and decisive. He gets into the paint. He hits, a little turnaround fadeaway or a pull-up jumper, or he's worked really hard on that 3 ball and he's been hitting those at a pretty steady clip. So maybe it is just a little blip on the radar and he'll get back into the flow of things. And even though he's only going to be getting what looks to be anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes a night, hopefully that's enough for him to get some rhythm, right? Where he's not getting just like 3 minutes and a half like he did against the Phoenix Suns. That's kind of what I predicted him to be getting, right? About 12 to 15 minutes a night. And this is something just to throw it out there into the ether for Rockets fans. But I know that there's some frustration. It has been all season long about, this feeling that the Rockets aren't doing a good enough job prioritizing the young guys, that they're not actively working on development of the young guys. And Jonathan Fagan actually threw out this stat the other night, so credit to him. I believe he threw it out Sunday night after the Rockets played the Clippers, or something during the game possibly. But the Rockets actually play, and I didn't verify this myself, but I trust Jonathan Fagan enough to just quote him, and hopefully it's true. Apparently, the Rockets play the most number of rookie and sophomore players. They give the most minutes to rookie and sophomore players of any team in the league besides the Orlando Magic. The Magic are the only team in the league that play more minutes for their rookies and sophomores than any other team besides the Rockets. And when you look up and down the roster, that holds true. I mean, and there's like a technicality in there too, in the sense that Kevin Porter Jr. is basically still in his sophomore year as far as like total games played, but he's classified as being in his 3rd year of NBA run. So he doesn't even count in this little formula, right? But when you look up and down the Rockets roster, let's just do their starting lineup, right? Jalen Green, rookie. You go all the way up to Jae'Sean Tate, sophomore. You go to their bench rotation, and the Rockets bench rotation is just a bunch of young guys, right? You got KJ Martin, you got Alperen Sengun, you got Josh Christopher. That's your main 3 off the bench, or has been your main 3 off the bench for a big, significant portion of the season. Garrison Matthews doesn't fall into the rookie or sophomore wire, unfortunately. And then same thing for Christian Wood. Christian Wood doesn't technically classify as a rookie or sophomore, but based on like his total games played and like his actual, extent of his NBA career, I basically give him like, yeah, he's at the tail end of like his sophomore year and maybe the beginning end of his junior year as far as being an NBA player. So where I'm going with this is there's this like misconception, it feels like, that the Rockets aren't prioritizing development. And maybe it's just because, on a given night, like Eric Gordon gets a few more touches than, you would have hoped, or Dennis Schroeder's maybe taking a few more shots than you would have liked to see. Although I've been, pleasantly surprised with Dennis Schroeder's overall demeanor. This is kind of like, it feels like the first game where he went out of his way to get his own against the Clippers and, was still very involved in getting other people involved on the floor. It's not like he didn't finish the game with 10 assists. So you can't be upset that he wasn't facilitating. He was just also trying to get his own shots at the same time, which I'm perfectly okay with. But at the end of the day, the Rockets do a pretty good job of making sure that all of their rookies and sophomores get adequate burn on a nightly basis. I think my biggest frustration coming out of especially this Clippers game was just how well Alperen Sengun was playing and the fact that he didn't get the nod to at least stay in the game a little bit longer down the stretch. And I firmly doubt we're going to see this take place this season, but I would love to see a situation where if Alp is outplaying Christian Wood in a given game, I'd love to see Steven Silas just roll with Alp to close things out. Like, I know that it probably won't happen, and it also won't happen for the main reason that Alp checks in, end of the first quarter, end of the third quarter, whatever. He plays his, 8 to 10 minute stretch of run, and it's really tough to have a player check in at the end of, say, the third quarter or with 2 or 3 minutes left in the third quarter and expect him to play the final 14, 15, 16 minutes straight in a row. This was a point that I brought up earlier this season as to why Alp isn't getting more burn than he currently is, because they basically only play Alp and Wood in conjunction with one another. Wood is on the floor, Alp's off. Alp's on the floor, Wood is off. That makes it really hard for Alp to get basically a third stretch of run in the game because of where he checks in and where he usually checks out. So even if the Alp is having a really good game like he was in this one, basically by about the 5-6 minute mark left in the fourth quarter, which is usually about when Christian Wood checks in, Alp's already encroaching upon, 9-10 minutes played straight in a row. And he's a big, right? And he's a big, and he doesn't, he's not, I don't want to say he's out of shape, but he doesn't have like incredible conditioning to where you can run him for the final 15, 18 minutes straight in a game and not expect him to be a little bit winded, to not be on his best behavior defensively, to not have all the energy in the tank, right? He's a big, he needs some rest here and there. And so I doubt we'll ever see that this season. If we do, I will be pleasantly surprised from Steven Silas if he opts to roll with Alperen Sengun to close out a game if he's having a better night than Christian Wood, because in this game against the Clippers, Wood had an all right evening. He's 6 of 12 from the floor, 1 of 2 from the 3-point line, 2 of 4 at the free throw line. He hit 2 of 2 at the free throw line, which was just an absolute miracle. He had 7 boards, 1 assist. An overall, decent game from Christian Wood. Not a horrendous game, but just the way that Alp was scoring with so much ease, the fact that Alp scored an equivalent number of points to Christian Wood in half the amount of time played, the fact that Alp was sopping up rebounds and was actually guarding the opposing bigs on the other team, as opposed to Christian Wood being stationed on the wing and Jae'Sean Tate having to guard Zubac down low and giving up a ton of rebounds to him because of just his sheer size, giving up 4 offensive rebounds. Like, there's just a lot of different things that make it really hard to be happy with Christian Wood on the floor right now, unfortunately. But with that, those are final thoughts on these 2 games for the Rockets against the Orlando Magic and against the Los Angeles Clippers, ultimately resulting in losses, which, hey, it's the final 1/3 stretch of the season. I predicted that they go 6-18 over this final 24-game stretch. So far, that is looking pretty promising. But as promised, let's do a quick tankathon sim here at the very end, just to see where we're at with the ping pong balls and if the basketball gods will look upon the Rockets with favor on this day. So here we go. Let's run the sim. Don't like this one. All right. First official sim here on LOR. And we've got Detroit clocking in at number 1, Indiana clocking in at number 2, OKC clocking in at number 3, and the Rockets and Orlando Magic are down at 4 and 5, respectively. So with that, if I'm going to speed through this draft class really quick, I'll probably go with, let's go with Jabari Smith Jr. to Detroit. Let's go with Paolo Banchero to Indiana. Let's go with Chet Holmgren to Oklahoma City. And that leaves the Rockets with Jaden Ivey at number 4. And then I'll just take AJ Griffin at number 5 for the Orlando Magic. So that is more or less, that's just my quick hitting guesses on those picks. But yeah, if the Rockets fall to 4, they basically are almost guaranteed Jaden Ivey as their pick at number 4, unless for some reason one of the other teams decides to go Jaden Ivey in the top 3, which is not completely out of the realm of possibility. But in this circumstance, I figure those 3 teams would pick the 3 bigs at the top of the draft. So with that, unfortunate tankathon spin for the Rockets, not walking away with one of the bigs in this year's NBA draft. But with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast: Apple, Spotify, Google, brand new Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Also, check out the Locked On Rockets YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. What was your favorite and least favorite part from these 2 games over the weekend for the Houston Rockets against the Orlando Magic and against the LA Clippers? Drop a comment. I do read each and every one of those when you post them there. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.